Good morning, everybody. It's good to be back here with you all today. I wanted to kick things off this morning by responding to a few of the outrageous things that happened last night. What you heard was transparent politicizing of tragic loss of American families and absolutely nothing to honor their losses with action. You did not hear about a plan to secure the border from the Republicans. You did not hear about a plan to reduce crime. You didn't hear about getting guns out of the hands of criminals. Because Donald Trump and Republicans aren't here to lead, it's because they are here to divide. In fact, it was Donald Trump who ordered his MAGA allies to kill the toughest, fairest bipartisan border deal in decades because it thought it would help him politically. President Biden sees things differently. He is a president of action. President Biden is fighting for these families. He understands their pain, and he's taking actions to protect American families because that's what real leaders do. I'm prepared to make a wild prediction that tonight will be more of the same as Republicans come together to coordinate their second-in-command, J.D. Vance. But before I talk about Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, I want to talk about our Vice President, Kamala Harris. She is a powerful voice in this nation. Kamala Harris's story is an American story, and she has spent her life serving the people. As a prosecutor, a district attorney, an attorney general, a United States senator, and as vice president, she has represented America around the world. She's fought for our rights and stood strongly with President Biden to deliver for our families. President Biden picked her because she is qualified for the job. Sadly, for J.D. Vance, I cannot say the same. But we know why Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance. Trump picked J.D. Vance because he would bend over backwards, enable Trump to do whatever he wants with his MAGA agenda, no matter the harm to the American people. Nowhere is that clearer than in J.D. Vance's extreme anti-reproductive freedom agenda. I'm joined today with Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, our co-chair of our campaign, Amanda Zarowski, and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, who in a moment will go into detail about the stakes of the election for Americans' reproductive freedom. But first, I want to just devote a little bit more time on exactly who J.D. Vance is. J.D. Vance is an anti-choice politician whose views on reproductive freedom and women's rights would take us back decades. He supports a nationwide ban on abortion and criticizes exceptions for rape, incest survivors, saying two wrongs don't make a right. In fact, he called rape and incest inconvenient. And he wants women to stay in violent marriages. For a party that is struggling with suburban women, that who Donald Trump's famously the one who proudly overturned Roe, chose to be his right-hand man. So you can bet that our campaign, Team Biden-Harris, is going to spend every moment from now until November reminding voters of the clear choice they'll face between a Trump-Vance administration who will ban abortion nationwide and a Biden-Harris administration who will never stop fighting for Americans and their rights and freedoms. When we do that, I've never been more confident that when voters head to the ballot box this fall, they will choose President Biden and Vice President Harris over Trump and J.D. Vance. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Governor Walz.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Walz. I'm the governor of the great state of Minnesota, just the western neighbor here. I'm glad you're all here, and I know it's day 3 of the convention. Each one of these has a theme. Last night was bend the knee and grovel, apparently, and today is celebrate Russia Day, I guess, with our foreign policy and destroy NATO. But look, I'm honored to be here with our leader, like Congresswoman Escobar, but especially with Amanda. And Republicans should be ashamed that Amanda is standing up here today. She's standing up here today because she nearly lost her damn lives because they were in that medical room. They believe it's their decision on her personal bodily autonomy. So as we start to talk about the issues and as we start to see this idea of J.D. Vance, I just want to say this. The perfect Frankenstein monster created by the Heritage Foundation. And I say this because I read Hillbilly Elegy. I read it because I come from a town of 400. I had 24 kids in my graduating class, 12 were cousins. And I know a little bit about small towns and his dismissive, derogatory approach to how he viewed it. It's not a cultural bias that people had. It's decades of policies of people like him and venture capitalists and others that gutted many of our small towns. The idea that that this guy would understand or have a policy. The thing that makes small towns work, The things that we value most around freedoms, whether it's reproductive freedoms, personal freedoms, but the things that make small towns work, this was not in Hillbilly Elegy. It should be, mind your own damn business. That's how small towns work. They work because you respect your neighbor and you understand their choices, who they marry, their own healthcare decisions, what books they read. So as we hear all the talk about, what's going to happen with Joe Biden, the good thing is with the Republicans, they don't have much division within their party. They bend the knee and they grovel to someone who told us that the election was stolen, someone who overturned Roe versus Wade, someone who told us he didn't know anything about NATO as he puts all of our futures at risk, and someone who won't address the biggest issues around climate change. Those are the issues that Americans care about. Those are the things that they want to see us get done. The Biden-Harris administration has delivered on all of their promises. It is galling to me to watch governors go up there and bend their knee. The very governors who go and cut ribbons for infrastructure projects that they had nothing to do with and their Republican members voted against because Joe Biden delivered. Or go up there and tell us they're going to take away the ACA and put in their plan. Yeah, I'll hold my breath for that. 4 years and we don't see a damn thing. And we have the most pro-union, pro-worker president in the history of this country, and I say that as a union member, who's there for our collective bargaining rights, who's there for our worker safety, who's there for our pension, and has made a commitment to protect one of the most sacred things that J.D. Vance and his advanced Yale degree tells us the biggest threat to our national finances and well-being is Social Security. Paying out the money that we paid into people to make sure that they're not in poverty. And that's where he goes. Couldn't be the venture capitalists and hedge fund managers' taxes. That wouldn't be the problem. But we get an opportunity in America in not too long to have a binary choice between someone who cares deeply about the American public, who has policies that made a difference, versus someone who made it very clear. Trump is for Trump. Truest words he ever said. That's exactly where it is. So when we talk about building this country from the bottom up in the middle class, as Joe Biden talks about, it's about unions, it's about personal freedoms, it's about addressing our biggest issues, and it's about taking care of our littlest Americans. And with that, someone who's done this, someone who's led in Congress, someone I'm proud to call a friend, Congresswoman Escobar.
Well, good morning, everyone. Quentin, thank you so much. Governor, it's so wonderful to be here with you. Amanda, I'm sorry you have to be on the campaign trail telling your story, but thank you for your courage. Really appreciate you. Everyone, I want to speak directly to American women to tell you that there's only one team on the ballot who cares about you, and that's the Biden-Harris team. The Trump-Vance ticket does not care about women. And we are here to sound the alarm about what's at stake in this November election, especially for women. We know that since Donald Trump sought to overturn Roe v. Wade, and he was successful in doing that, 1 in 3 women in America now live in a state with an abortion ban. That's 1 in 3 women of childbearing age. It is an abomination that this is the vision that they have for all American women. And we need to only look at what they've said and what they've done and what they are planning to do. We need to believe them when they tell us what they want to do. We know that Donald Trump called the fact that states now have the power to do to Amanda what the state of Texas did, he called that a beautiful thing. We know that abortion bans put women and their health at risk. In fact, in Texas, the infant mortality rate has gone through the roof. We also know that because in Texas there are no exceptions, that there have been tens of thousands of women who've been raped, who have been forced to take the child to term after that rape. These women's lives have been transformed irrevocably. And that is the dark vision that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have for all women across America. We can prevent this. we can stand up to that dark vision, and we can embrace the vision that the Biden-Harris campaign, the Biden-Harris administration, the Biden-Harris team and voters want for America. That is a vision where we trust women, where we want to protect women's reproductive freedom, where we recognize that abortion is health care, where we recognize that these bans are deadly and dangerous and harmful. And no one knows that story and the consequences of these awful abortion bans more than our next speaker, a fellow Texan who has a harrowing story. And again, I want to speak to the women of America and everyone who cares about the women in their lives, especially the women of childbearing age. We are sounding the alarm. There is much at risk for all of us, but we can defend women, fight for women, and stand up for women this November. I'd like to again thank and welcome Amanda Zarowski, who's going to share her harrowing story with all of us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Governor. And thank you, Quentin. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Amanda Zarowski, and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm here today to share my own story, a story that was only made possible because of Donald Trump, and one that, if it is up to Trump and his new running mate, J.D. Vance, could become a reality for far too many other Americans. In the spring of 2022, my husband Josh and I learned I was pregnant with our first baby, a girl. We were over the moon. My first trimester was smooth sailing, but then suddenly at 18 weeks, I suffered catastrophic complications. My cervix dilated prematurely, and there was no way to safely reverse course. So we were with 100% certainty going to lose our baby girl. We were devastated. What I needed at that point was an abortion so that I could safely and with dignity deliver my daughter and begin the healing process both physically and emotionally. But unfortunately, this was post-Roe, Texas. The near total abortion ban had gone into effect just 2 days after my water broke. Ending the pregnancy would have been considered an illegal abortion, and my doctor would be at risk of loss of her license and even jail time. I was told to wait until I got so sick that my life was considered in danger, one of the rare exceptions where a doctor can intervene in Texas. It took 3 days and a near-death crash into septic shock before my doctor could finally provide the health care that I desperately needed. She stabilized my vitals enough to deliver our baby, who we named Willow, but then I crashed again with another bout of sepsis and was transferred to the ICU. I was there for 3 days, and my family flew in from across the country for fear that I wouldn't make it through the night. It was in that dark and lonely hospital room where I realized I was actually lucky. I lived, and I knew others might not be so lucky. What I went through was nothing short of barbaric, and it didn't need to happen, but it did because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump and his allies continuously brag about killing Roe v. Wade, and it is unthinkable to me that anyone could cheer on the cruel abortion bans that nearly took my life. But they do. Tonight we're going to hear from Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, a man with a record just as extreme and an agenda just as threatening as Donald Trump. Don't just take my word for it. He has an A+ rating from the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Choice America list and supports a nationwide abortion ban. He wanted to make it harder for Ohio voters to engage in a democratic process and vote to protect their fundamental right to reproductive health care. And his anti-choice agenda is so extreme that he doesn't even think there should be exceptions for rape or incest survivors, actually saying 2 wrongs don't make a right. He calls these devastating circumstances inconvenient. My husband Josh and I are now desperately trying to start a family through IVF, but J.D. Vance voted against legislation to protect IVF. It's appalling. Tragically, my story is not unique. I am one of many women in our country whose life has been put at risk because of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's anti-reproductive freedom agenda. I know this because I've met them. From Texas to Arizona, Idaho to Georgia, women like me have been told that we're not sick enough to receive care that we desperately need. We've been turned away from hospitals. We've been found collapsed on bathroom floors. We have been told to flee our state borders in the hope of receiving basic reproductive care. We have been robbed of our freedom. I'm just one of those women. Like most Americans, I believe that healthcare decisions belong between a woman and her doctor. But if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are elected, they will make my devastating story, the stories I've heard across the country, the reality for far too many more American women. That's why we must reelect President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats up and down the ballot. They are fighting for reproductive freedom, and they won't stop until they restore the protections of Roe so that people in every state have access to the care they need. The stakes of this election could not be higher for our lives and for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Thank you, Congresswoman Escobar, and thank you, Amanda, particularly for your bravery. I know that it is not easy sharing those stories, living through them nonetheless, and getting up and talking about them in front of people, but you're doing it for a cause. And I don't know how anybody could hear what Amanda just said and think that the Republican Party, with two individuals at the top of the ticket, men nonetheless, could double down on reproductive stances like they do, cheer them on, and think it's okay. And so, again, I just want to thank you, Amanda, for that. So now I'll open it up to some Q&A.
Examiner, this is actually a question for the governor. I think you sent around a letter about the virtual roll call. Can you just confirm the dates of that and why you suggested an August date? Is that to give the party time to think about the president's nomination?
Yeah, the parlor game of the virtual vote. Look, Bishop Daughtry, I, and the Rules Committee, our job is to set the rules for a convention. This has been done always. One of the things is, just to be clear, and it's not by coincidence, J.D. Vance in Ohio. Ohio's legislature in the ballot access, the timing of it was the initial part of making the virtual ballot, making sure our delegates, as they got there, committed to Biden and Harris to cast those votes. And the timing of the convention makes it so that we need to get that in ahead of time. This meeting was scheduled for many months, the one on Friday, and it was never meant to be the virtual roll call. It'll be setting out the agenda together as the Rules Committee moving forward. That virtual vote won't happen before the 1st of August, and we just need to get it done probably by the 15th of August to make sure that those signatures on things are in the Secretary of State's. And it's including states, I believe Washington's August 20th, the second day of our convention. So those are the reasons for it. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not my job to call. I'm used to being home.
You're good, Governor.
Megan Musserly with Politico. So Vice President Harris postponed her Florida trip where she was going to talk about abortion in light of Saturday's shooting. You know, President Biden is still facing calls to drop out of the race. How can the campaign effectively prosecute its case on abortion in this current moment?
Well, one, as you heard from Amanda, many women are living through it. And so when you have something that, unfortunately, because of the Republican Party, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, so many people are actually living through day to day, it's pretty easy to connect on it. Our campaign is going to continue to talk about the issues. We're going to continue to have people like Amanda telling their stories because, unfortunately, they're far too common. The vice president has been out across this country, crisscrossing across the battleground states, talking to voters about the stakes of this election. I think that J.D. Vance's nomination as vice president obviously gives a new angle to that because, unfortunately, Donald Trump's first act after something horrific happened to him, no doubt about it, and there's no place for political violence in our country, his first thing was to pick a vice presidential nominee who wants to continue doubling down on hurting women like Amanda and women across this country that are of reproductive age. And so our case is pretty clear. We're going to continue to point out where the Republican Party and Donald Trump's MAGA extremists stand on the issue of abortion. They want a nationwide abortion ban. doubling down on it. They want to get rid of IVF and family planning services. They don't believe or trust women, nor do they respect them enough to think that they should control their own reproductive freedom. And so our case to Americans is pretty clear. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris trust women. Joe Biden respects women enough to actually listen to them and put one as his vice president who has actually gone through talking about and understanding women's choices and the things that women in this country have to go to. Nevertheless, a black woman. Let's get into the facts about black maternal health care in this country. And so our case is pretty clear, and we're going to continue to take it to the American people every single day from now until November.
So I just wanted to ask again about the virtual roll call vote. I actually covered this story in Ohio about the Secretary of State's threat to take Biden off the ballot. He currently says that that is no longer the case. In fact, he laid out on Twitter.
Oh, then it's all okay.
Well, I'm asking specifically because he said, listen, you know, they could even switch Biden off the ballot until I think the end of August, right? I mean, if the Republicans are saying now that this is no longer an issue, the Secretary of State, the legislature has passed, you know, this bill fixing this, why still use this as a reason when so many people in the party are concerned about pushing through Biden's nomination?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. First of all, the Secretary of State there has made it clear that they could still do that. Look, I think if we were in a simpler time, we've always done this. We've just trusted each other and we've got it done. Now, because of how this was done and because of the comments that were made, there was something to it. But it's not just a reason. Like I said, we have Washington State on the 20th. These are wet signatures that need to be in. And I think the process of how we do this, it's how we've always done it. So I don't think it's not just Ohio. It's the process of getting on the ballots. The idea, look, we're in a time where voter restriction is just, it's not a bug, it's a feature of the Republican Party. I don't trust them in Ohio to do this, but that's not the only reason for it. We need to get these things done. We need to get the roll call done. And like I said, I think it needs to get done 15th. Don't absolute quote on this. We need to get done on 15th, but it won't happen before the 1st of August. And this meeting that we're doing, again, was scheduled many months. It was scheduled way before the debate. It was scheduled way before anything else. And the process and the agenda for this was to start setting the rules for the convention, as we've always done. So,
Amar, really quickly, again, folks, the Republicans yesterday and the day before have lied constantly to the American people. They've lied about positions on reproductive freedom. They've doubled down on harmful positions about everything. They've lied about crime statistics. They've lied about the economy. Today we're going to hear them lie about foreign policy. Donald Trump says he wants to be a dictator. They're going to lie about their stance of NATO. They're going to lie about the security of our country. And we're focused on a process. Like, the Republicans are lying to the American people about virtually every single issue that impacts their lives. And we're caught up in process stories. So, Amar, we're going to continue to take some questions. Go ahead.
Voice. Quentin, are there going to be more press events like this in regards to Project 2025? Because I sent a reporter in Atlanta for one that's happening at 2 o'clock today with Representative Hank Johnson and others. So is this going to be something that we're going to focus on a lot more in regards to making sure that we talk to the press about Project 2025?
Thank you for the question, Ellen. Absolutely. It is extremely important for us. Again, our whole thing has been this election as a choice. And there are two very different visions for this country. We heard the president in Detroit lay out his vision where he wants to expand health care. He wants to expand the cap on prescription drugs, continue to lower costs. He wants to make sure that there is no nationwide abortion ban. He wants to pass the PRO Act. He wants to make sure kids continue to not have to drink dirty water, internet access. That is where President Biden and Vice President Harris's focus is. And when it comes to Project 2025, that is Donald Trump's agenda for a second term. He is trying to moderate his position on it. The Supreme Court that he largely appointed have given him untethered and fettered power that we have not seen any president have. And he is going to use Project 2025 and his his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, to continue to push that forward, gutting checks and balances, getting rid of critical government department agencies like the Department of Education, and then shoving a nationwide abortion ban down the throats of women like Amanda across this country. So we're going to continue to talk about it every single day and make sure that we're drawing that contrast.
Brendan Jones, TMJ4 News. Driving around Milwaukee, you can see near construction zones. You know, Biden infrastructure plan paid for this construction zones. What other ways are you guys looking to campaign in Milwaukee, and why should Milwaukee voters select you guys in November?
Well, first we should just start by Donald Trump saying that he thought Milwaukee was disgusting and that he hates being here. That seems like a good place to start for Milwaukee voters. But second, I think that the work that you do see around is creating jobs. Milwaukee voters are just like voters from across this country. Inflation is continuing to come down. Milwaukeeans with diabetes, their insulin is capped at $35 because of the work of the Biden-Harris administration. Milwaukeeans with student loan debt, they're getting their debt forgiven because of the Biden-Harris administration. Unfortunately, any that are under 20, or fortunately, any that are under the age of 26 are continuing to be able to allow to stay on their parents' health care insurance because of President Biden, and it has been expanded. So we're going to continue to draw the stakes of this election. Women of reproductive age have more to lose in Milwaukee and Wisconsin than anyone else, unfortunately. Let's talk about African-American voters. Black jobs. President Biden believes that a black job could be the first black president of the United States, or the vice president, or a Supreme Court justice, or if that's not enough, or Secretary of Defense. Donald Trump believes that black jobs are menial labor jobs that are being taken by immigrants who he claims are crossing the border. Another lie, when he stood in the way and did absolutely nothing. And then going beyond that, the person that he picked to be his vice presidential nominee was in the United States Senate when they were negotiating a bipartisan bill and did absolutely nothing. J.D. Vance had an opportunity to lead on immigration, and he did nothing. He has stood by, and he's going to continue to be a double rubber stamp for Donald Trump and a divisive extreme agenda that is out of touch. And so when it comes to why Wisconsins and Milwaukeeans should support the Biden-Harris ticket, I think that the choice is very, very clear.
Hi, Oriana with Notice. I wanted to know if Democrats plan to center gun safety after the assassination attempt against Trump, and if so, how?
Look, I first want to start by saying this, and I think it has to be a prerequisite about any question that comes after this or relates to what happened. What happened to former President Trump is appalling. It has no place in our political system. I think we saw President Biden come to Americans immediately, not as candidate Joe Biden, although that is a hard distinction to make, but as President Joe Biden from the Oval Office to double down on the fact that we can't stand for this. We have to continue to move past it in this country. Incidents like what happened to Paul Pelosi, what happened to former President Trump, what happened to Gabby Giffords, they have no place here. But when it comes to your questions, particularly on gun violence and gun reform, we're not changing our position on this. And unfortunately, I will have to say, because we're talking about what we're seeing on the streets walking around here, yesterday coming into our office here today, I saw a raffle for an AR-15. I saw a raffle for an AR-15. So when it comes to where we are, we have been the party of common sense gun reform. We have been the party of making sure that people need basic background checks before they can get weapons. Nobody needs an AR-15 for sport, an AK-47 for sport. So there's no illusion now that since this we are somehow changing our position on where we have been. We have always been. We have never said that, that teachers should be responsible somehow for protecting their students for gun violence. We've never said things like when school shootings happen that we should just get over it when people are losing their kids. And so our position on this has been very clear. It was the same position before the assassination attempt on former President Trump, and it's going to be the same as we continue to move forward.
Abril Preciado, WITI Fox 6. So my question is, what can you tell us, or what can you tell the Latino community regarding immigration and what comes next as far as like many of them trying to gain legal status in the country? I know this is a topic that's very important for Latinos here in Wisconsin, or the immigrant community in Wisconsin that are dealing or struggling with even having a driver's license, DACA recipients as well. So what can you tell us about this?
I represent El Paso, Texas, an incredible community of goodwill right on the U.S.-Mexico border. So no one knows better than my community about the opportunity that exists through the Biden-Harris administration and much of the work that they've done. I had the privilege of being with the president a few weeks ago as he announced his executive order to keep some mixed family status or some mixed families, or some families of mixed status together through the executive order. That executive action was based off of one of my bills, the American Families United Act. We saw early on in the administration, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris deliver to the United States Congress a comprehensive immigration reform bill. It has been President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris who have been urging Congress to do its job. There's only one body that can change our outdated immigration laws, and that's the United States Congress. We have not seen Congress act on comprehensive immigration reform in 37 years. 37 years. It is our job to legislate. I have been urging my colleagues to sign on to my own bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that addresses the border and beyond. But I'll tell you this, drawing the contrast, whereas President Biden worked with a bipartisan group of senators to enact a border security bill, it was Donald Trump and the Republicans who were the obstructionists. They even said very clearly, we don't want any solutions. We want the problems because it helps us politically. The American people do not want legislators who refuse to do their job, or a presidential candidate who urges legislators not to do their job. Furthermore, when you look at Project 2025, which again, I would urge every reporter and every American to do a deep dive on this terrifying blueprint for what Republicans want for America. Republicans are through Project 2025 are advocating for some of the most extreme anti-immigration policies. Donald Trump has leaned in on wanting mass deportations and creating deportation camps at the border. There was a great story in the New York Times yesterday. One of the reporters, Jasmine Ulloa, interviewed Republican Latinos who said they don't really quite believe that Donald Trump will do what he's promising to do. And I want everyone to go back and read the story of the Indiana man who was married to a woman who voted for Donald Trump, who under the Trump administration was deported. Someone who had been here for 20 years, who had started a restaurant, a beloved member of the Indiana community. But Donald Trump kept his promise, which was to deport him and to deport people like him. His wife was shocked. She said she never imagined that would happen. Look at what they've done. Look at what they're promising to do. We know that under Donald Trump, the horrific family separations occurred. I want you all to go back and listen to the audio of crying babies who were taken from their mother's arms and separated, many of those families still not reunited, causing generational trauma for vulnerable people, all because they were here seeking asylum. What the Trump-Vance ticket promises is horror for immigrant communities on a level that I don't know people quite understand. Not only is it absolutely inhumane, but I will tell you it would be destructive for our national economy. We know for a fact that immigrants help grow our GDP. The Congressional Budget Office talked about how immigrant labor and the immigrant labor force helped our country recover post-COVID. We know that if we were to offer work permits and legal pathways for people, we would further reduce inflation, further become a more competitive nation, fill the 8 million unfilled jobs that exist in America today. And it's just one party that proposes solutions over and over again. That's the Democratic Party led by Biden-Harris. And there's one party that is an obstructionist party, and that is the MAGA GOP led by the Trump-Vance ticket. They don't want solutions. So there's a very stark difference in the two visions for America. And we are, again, I will say this over and over again, we are sounding the alarm. We have an opportunity to have an inclusive country where we seize on the opportunity and solve our challenges, or not. And the alternative is very dark.
Veronica with CNN. Can I get your response to Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley's appearance last night at the RNC, particularly Nikki Haley's endorsement of Donald Trump, given the Biden's campaign outreach to her supporters?
Look, I think that Nikki Haley and her supporters are two different groups of people. Nikki Haley's supporters voted for her during the primary, hundreds of thousands of them, well above the margin of victory in every single one of the states where Republican primaries took place. Unfortunately, Nikki Haley got on stage last night and spewed MAGA extremist talking points. But her supporters, while they were voting for her in the primary, I think it's more important to point out what they were voting against. They were voting against Donald Trump and an extreme MAGA agenda, one that would put democracy at risk, one that would rip away women's reproductive freedoms, one that wants to continue to bash voting rights in this country, one that does not care about anyone other than Donald Trump sitting at the top as a dictator. That is what those Nikki Haley supporters were voting against. So it's no surprise what Nikki Haley did last night. This is politics. But at the end of the day, those voters that are actually going to go to the ballot box and decide who's going to be the president of the United States, they voted against Donald Trump in those primaries because they see exactly who he is. They saw the devastation that he brought to this country when he was president for 4 years. They have seen what he would do. They read things like Project 2025. And in fact, when we're talking about these Nikki Haley supporters, these independent, sort of moderate-leaning Republicans, they deeply care about government. They deeply care about these things, and Project 2025 would cut, just completely eliminate very large governmental agencies that people depend on. And I think that those voters are going to continue to see through that. And unfortunately, last night, Nikki Haley lost her way in speaking to those people, but I think, again, they voted against Donald Trump in the primary, and we're going to continue to make sure that they know exactly where our vision is for this country versus that of Donald Trump's. I can hear you. Got it.
You want to hold it? Okay, sorry. Jake Lahat, Daily Beast. This is for any of you, but Governor Walz, you've talked before about how the party should, in some instances, simplify its messaging against Republicans. And I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but to paraphrase, you basically said things along the lines of, like, these guys are a bunch of weirdos and people should...
I stand by that, too, by the way. So.
I was going to guess you would. My question is a bit of a follow on Megan's, which is, who do you think is the most effective messenger for what you're talking about here with reproductive rights in Project 2025? Is that President Biden? Is it Vice President Harris? Or is it regular everyday citizens like Amanda who are coming forward with these deeply personal and traumatic stories? And I ask that because you've all given us, you've been very generous with your time in this press conference. I think it's an open question as to whether President Biden could or would hold a similar event like this, speak extemporaneously on the issues without notes, without a teleprompter. Are you confident he could do that, or do you think that he'll stay on the top level stuff and we'll see more of things like this?
No, I am confident. It's a great question. I think it's all of us. I keep talking about that. I'm biased. I think governors are one of the best messengers. I talk about it, whether it's reproductive rights or whether it's the Infrastructure Act, CHIPS Act, or whatever. The folks who are closest to people, look, I don't think you could come to something like this if you are not moved and clearly heard what Amanda said. That's as clear as it gets. It's incumbent upon all of us to continue to make that message, and she's certainly a better deliverer of this message. And as a man, it's time to shut the hell up at times in these spaces and step back, but there's a time to speak about where it's at, learn from folks, echo these things, tell Amanda's story. So yeah, I'm confident he can do it, but I think it's much more important that we have the narratives of the people who are out there. We have the workers who are benefiting from it.
And I think that's the last question, but the political operative in me won't let something that you said go away. But President Biden deeply understands what average people in America are going through. And as Governor Walz said, there are things that he knows that he can't understand because he's not a woman. He's not in those positions. And so on those issues, he knows when to shut up and let other people talk about their experiences. But President Biden is deeply connected to voters across this country and understands what they're going through in their daily lives, and that's exactly what makes him a better candidate to lead this country than Donald Trump. So I want to thank you all for coming back today. This is a very good, productive conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.